Hello and welcome everyone to the first episode of SoCal with Val. I am your host, Valerie Van de Zilver, and I couldn't be more excited to take you along with me as we explore the incredible sights, tastes, and experiences that Southern California has to offer. After all, my career has taken me through about every city in this beautiful state, helping homeowners and home sellers, discovering hidden gems, managing vacation rental properties, and of course, enjoying plenty of food and wine along the way. It's a dream come true to bring these experiences just straight to you. Each week, we'll be uncovering stories behind SoCal's iconic landmarks, beloved eateries, world famous wine shops and wineries, and cozy vacation rentals, boutique hotels, places to stay, and secret spots that must be on your visit list. So, whether you live here or you're planning a getaway, SoCal with Val will give you some insider tips, fascinating history, and a little taste of California magic. So stay tuned for other episodes. Some of those will be vacations, vino, and villas. And we will have some episodes of ageless travel. And we will look into lots of other exciting adventures. So today, what better way to kick off our show, our very first episode, by diving into one of the most exciting things in the state of California, and that is wine. We are so excited today to have someone joining us who truly embodies the spirit and the expertise of Southern California's wine scene. If you haven't met him, you are in for a real treat. Kyle Meyer is the co-owner of the Wine Exchange in Santa Ana. I think that's his title. He certainly does more than half of the work, I'm sure. And Wine Exchange has been a landmark destination for decades in Orange County, but they are definitely not just a wine store. I discovered that the first time I walked in before they even opened, I knew that it was something truly different. Kyle is not only a wine expert, he's an aficionado. I mean, I can't even say all the words about Kyle Meyer's knowledge and expertise in the wine industry. And just by listening to him for a few minutes, you're going to figure it out for yourself. He has almost an encyclopedic knowledge, actually he does, of wines all over the world. Not only the grapes, the vineyards, I mean, he knows every little detail about every wine in the entire world. He's absolutely amazing. His passion for discovering extraordinary bottles and sharing that knowledge with others is what's made the Wine Exchange one of the most respected wine stores in the business. So whether you're a seasoned collector, you're a casual wine lover, or you're someone who just wants to know what wine you should pick up for dinner tonight or to take on a picnic or a backpacking trip, Kyle has a gift for making the world of wine accessible, exciting, bringing it to life, and of course, absolutely delicious. You can't imagine what you will learn by just spending even an hour with Kyle, although I am excited to tell you it's not official, but we are hoping that he will be somewhat regular on our show. So we're thrilled to have him here today. I want to just give you a little background about the Wine Exchange, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kyle. Wine Exchange with Kyle Meyer was, he was certainly one who tuned it up. It was a store in Orange, actually, had been in existence for a long time, but it was one of the first retailers to establish an online presence. They became WineX when they became the wine. First of all, they were Best Wines Online, which is when I first met them. And the company continues to offer wines at rock bottom prices. But Kyle brought his friend Tristan, whose impact was immediately felt because Tristan brought his experience, vast experience of Bordeaux and all that he offers there. They immediately came together and they formed Best Wines Online. And what could be better than Best Wines Online, right? So using multimedia platforms, including substantial video contributions. And if you haven't seen Kyle's videos, you need to watch them. In the morning, Kyle will put out a video and he says, now you need to buy this. You need to have this. And I say to him, okay, I will. And I immediately order whatever he says that you should have. And you'll find that you get addicted to this also. So this team has created one of the most perfect wine sales and education platforms. including a dynamic website. Sometimes they're irreverent, but daily written videos, their YouTube channel, all the things that they have to offer. So Kyle and his team continue to push the envelope a little bit, but they offer wine at great prices, and no one knows more or makes wine buying any more fun than Kyle and the team at Wine Exchange. Kyle Meyer, welcome to SoCal with Val.
Thanks, Val. That was super flattering.
Well, all true, true, and probably doesn't even tell enough about you. So tell us, let's start about your background. I mean, at some point in time, you said, I kind of like wine.
Yeah, I started really early, super early, and
How early, Kyle?
I was 16,
Whoa.
honestly. So I couldn't even drink yet, technically, but you know how that is in high school.
Yeah.
Well, basically what had happened is, my folks were like, you need to get a job. Because, our generation, we didn't, yeah, when you were 15 years old, our parents, the generation before, they were one generation removed from the industrial age, so
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
like 15 years old and you need to get a job. It's like, okay, I'll get a job. And what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to bag groceries, right? So I went from paper route to bagging groceries, and I spent 2 months bagging groceries at like a major grocery store, major,
A
supermarket
respectable
chain.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that lasted exactly 2 months
Oh,
when I learned how it worked there at a supermarket chain like that, and so I ended up working for a gourmet grocery store in Palm Springs by the name of Jensen's Finest Foods, which a
yes.
lot of folks that go to the desert, go to the valley, they're very aware of Jensen's. It's one of the popular, it's like Gelson's, huh?
Yeah.
Like a gourmet grocery store in the Coachella Valley. And I started working there at Bag Groceries. And after a while, I was drawn to the wine department. It was a huge curiosity for me because I remember going to the wine department, and when you're 16 years old, like the most expensive things in the store are really cool.
Right. Yep.
And I remember going to the wine department, and there was Montrachet wine, and it was I remember even back in 1986, it was $160 a bottle
Wow.
for Montrachet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is this wine so expensive? And I ended up spending more time in the aisle, learning the aisle, walking the aisle, looking at the wines. And eventually the buyer at Jensen's noticed my interest, and he said, hey, I need a new stocker guy. I need a person to stock the shelves. I need a person in the wine and liquor department. Do you want to be that guy? And I said, yes, of course. Yes, I want to be that guy. And even though I wasn't 18 yet, so he said, okay, well, I'm going to make you the guy, but don't tell anybody that you're not 18. And I was like, okay, great. And then once he knew that I was into it and that I was really interested and I was nerding out on it, then he began to sign bottles off to my parents for me to take home. So he would say, he'd give me a great bottle of, JJ Prune Riesling from the Mosel or something and say, for Kyle's dad. And so I could leave the store with it. And then we would go home, and actually I would drink the wine with my folks. And it really was like the proper way to get involved with fine wine. It was really cool. I was working in this great store with a wonderful selection of wines for the time, very progressive set, back in the mid 80s. And I was learning about all the great wines. I was taking bottles home, and I was just having these constant epiphanies, when I was a junior, senior in high school. And from there, by the time I was 17, 18 years old, I was like, I want to do this. This is fun. I love this. And it was very challenging. It was already very challenging, because,
And how was that?
well, because you had to have this base of knowledge. It wasn't just widgets. It wasn't like, okay, I have this bottle of water, and the thing is, next year, this bottle of water is still this bottle of water. The
Right.
year after that, it's this bottle of water. But this bottle of wine changes every year.
Yeah.
It changes. The whiteboard is wiped clean. So you don't just have to have knowledge of one product. You have to have knowledge tenfold, 20-fold of a base of products. And that, to me, well, at the time when I was 18, what it was job security.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
If I know this stuff and no one else knows this stuff, I can't get fired. So it was more selfish and
Sure.
fun.
And fun.
And I was like, okay, so if I could just get a job where I'm the one that knows about this stuff and no one else does, then I can't get fired. And the wine business is kind of cool and fun. And that's when you're younger, when you're a teenager, that's the direction you're looking at it, you know. Um, and then from there, I traveled the world for a year in a traveling performing group. So I basically went on tour for a year performing.
And what did you perform?
I was a singer. You're gonna laugh.
Oh, no, I don't know this about you.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was in. Have you ever heard of Up with People?
Yes,
Up with People. Yeah. So
absolutely.
I
No.
was in a traveling cast of Up with People back in '89. So when I was 18 years old, I went for a year on the road and performed with the Up with People cast.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
killer.
my brother went up with people, but I think he was before you.
Yeah, yeah. No, it
Yeah,
was super
fascinating.
great experience, super
Yep.
fun.
Yeah.
And then and then I came back and I'm like, okay, so what do I want to do? I was like, no, I still want to be in the wine business. So I started going to college and then found my way to Cal State Fullerton, going to university there. And then at that time, I asked my old boss in Palm Springs. I said, "Hey, I'm moving to Orange County," and I said, "Give me three wine shops I should visit." And he put out High Time, very great,
Sure.
distinguished store at the
In
beach,
Costa Mesa. Yeah.
Costa Mesa, beautiful independent retailer. He put out a wine club, which is no longer in operation, but at the time they were very happening. And then he put out Wine Exchange, which at the time was still called Liquor Exchange. They hadn't officially changed
Oh,
their name yet. And he
oh,
said, these are the three top guys in Orange County, go see them. So I interviewed at all three places. Well, I'm from Palm Springs and I was 19 years old or 20 years old. So I interviewed with flip-flops, pair of shorts, t-shirts,
of course.
baseball. And uh, and two of the places didn't have a spot for me, and one of the places did. And that was at the time it was Liquor Exchange, which we changed the name to Wine Exchange shortly thereafter. And that was in 1991. So I started with the company in 1991, a month before my 21st birthday.
Really.
Yep, yep. And then the rest is kind of history. From there, I spent 20 years with the company, and then I don't know what pace you want to go at or whatever from a
Uh,
timing standpoint. You tell me.
Yeah, go ahead. No, this is fascinating. I didn't know any of this about you.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know anything about your background.
Yeah. So I was with Wine Exchange, and then from '91 to 2012 or late 2011, and then Tristan, my partner here at the Wine Exchange, such as we know it today, came along in 2001. And he was there for a decade as well at the same store that we were, the same on Tustin Street in Orange.
Yes, that's
And
right.
yeah, that place. And then from there, we Tristan and I decided to go our separate ways with the old store. And then we opened our Best Wines Online, the place that you became familiar with straight away, even before we were open.
Yeah,
Yeah, just who's this lady just walking in the door?
I know. And I
What
walked
is
in, I
this
said, what is
place?
it? What are best wines online, right?
Right?
Mhm.
No, it was fabulous. And the thing is, we chose that name because at that point in time, when we left Wine Exchange, we didn't necessarily want to have a walk-in retail establishment. We were thinking about just being online because it was easier business to facilitate. We didn't have to hassle and we love customers. We love those experiences, but at the same time, we were like trying to maximize the efficiency of our business because we were a new business, and so by doing it that way, facilitating online business is less expensive than facilitating in-house business, shall we say? So yeah, so we started on that model, but within 2 years we had to allow walk-in customers again per certain regulations, alcohol beverage control regulations, and ABC wouldn't allow customers that bought online to come and pick up their wines unless we had a walk-in retail license.
Oh,
So basically, we had to come back and become a regular walk-in retailer again in 2013. Like a year and a half later, we had to go get that license, and then yeah, we became basically and so we got the license, and they were like, well, why don't we just be Wine Exchange again? So we called the old owners, and who we left on, considering that we'd been there 20 years and we left somewhat abruptly, we had left on pretty good terms actually, all in all, considering. And then from there, we basically took the Wine Exchange business and put it on our new platform that we had developed, the Best Wines Online, with better technology, better customer service, better this and that. And then the rest is history. We basically became Wine Exchange in early 2015, and so for the last decade, that's how we've operated.
But wasn't he about ready to retire at that time anyway? I mean, wasn't kind of the
Yeah.
timing was good for both of you?
Yeah, it's always good, and we knew that the boys, there was two brothers that had owned the business before, and we knew that they were interested in kind of transitioning out of the business, and but still, one of the brothers still definitely wanted to keep his feet wet, still loved the wine business, still was passionate about it, so we just had to work on a plan to make sure that one of the brothers, Steve, still stayed on with us. I learned from Steve. He was from a wine expertise standpoint and marketing standpoint, he was a great mentor. Um, very astute palate, dynamite writer, and just had really ability to convey on paper thoughts and emotions about particular bottles of wine, which was super helpful for me because I was a good writer, because I did well in English in college and that kind of stuff and did writing, but I wasn't as astute from a marketing standpoint with regards to the the concise nature of marketing fine wine. When you're a kid and you're in wine, you're like, oh, I want to use flowery words and lots of syllables and pretend and show everyone all my skill and da da da. And in fact, when you're marketing wine, it's not that way. It's the complete opposite.
So do you think he was like your mentor? You're great writers, both of you are.
Mhm.
And so do you think he kind of got you motivated thinking along that line of sending out your emails like you do every day?
Yes, and it was really fortunate. I got lucky because the way he started writing, I wrote like that in high school, actually. So in my English classes in high school, I was pretty concise and straight to the point. When you had, I don't know if you remember, but in my generation, we had to write those 5 paragraph essays,
Yeah.
in advanced placement English, and it was just using the same words over and over again. And I remember just being, my English teachers being, pissed off at me because my writing was too concise and too straight to the point. And so I didn't get great grades on a lot of the papers I wrote in high school. But for regards how wine marketing, it was brilliant. And it was exactly the way that I needed to write. And I already kind of wrote that way. And Steve, and the way he wrote, just kind of cemented that aspect of it, where you want descriptions, but you don't want it too descriptive. You want a story, but you don't want, war and peace, you know.
Yeah, but your
So
stories are amazing. I mean, people need to, everybody, Karen, we need to be sure to put on the bottom, how people can find you and listen to you because almost every day, some days Tristan will do it,
mhm,
but almost every day you have a story about someone and your story goes into the personality and who the owner of the vineyard was and the
mhm,
history and their father and where
mhm,
they bought the land from and how long they've
mhm,
owned it. And I just sit there and I was like, oh my gosh. And I should take a little break here just to tell people how I first was even interested in stopping at your store. So I was on the board of the Pacific Symphony and was at a board meeting one night and I sat next to this man, Fred Salter. And I
mhm,
said, oh, so what do you do here? And he said, well, we're starting a charity wine auction. And this was during the really hard times of real estate. And I thought,
mhm,
well, that's interesting. I said, I might like to do that, knowing nothing about wine. So my job the first year was to get donations and then eventually to help price wine. I knew nothing about wine.
mhm,
I knew my husband drank wine. He was from Holland and his dad drank wine, blah, 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 right? So I knew there was red and white. Really, that was all I knew. So my job was to price the wine. So I would take a bottle and I would look it up on Robert Parker,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And then I discovered for the first time that you not only look up the name of the wine, but the vineyard, the place where it grew, who
mhm,
the winemaker was, the year, the kind of the grape it was. And I was fascinated. I was smitten, as you would say,
mhm,
that this is so interesting. And just like you said, from one year to another, the wine changes price. So when I
mhm.
hear you tell your stories, and you go into so much detail, it's fascinating. I could listen to you all the time, which we've had the opportunity to do once in a while.
Mhm. You caught that same bug, that I caught.
I know.
And I
I
was
keep
always a
coming
history
in. I have
buff.
to say, I keep coming in and asking you to hire me. You haven't done that yet. So, and this is the closest I'm going to get. So that's all right.
Well, there's a height requirement,
Yeah,
Valerie.
yeah, I know. And if I ever retire, maybe you'll let me sell on. No one will see me. So yeah, so you learned to write from Steve.
Yeah,
Like how
yeah.
did you And there's hundreds of people that come into your store every month that write or that know about wine,
Mhm.
but very few people know about wine like you do.
Mm.
How
Well,
did it, was it your personality? Was it being around Steve? How did you get all the depth of knowledge that you have?
I was very fortunate. I was super lucky. I was in a position that not many people getting into the industry or advancing in the industry now get to, which was I was working for one of the coolest, most progressive retailers at the time, even in the early '90s, and I got to be that guy, right? I got to be Luke Skywalker to Yoda, right? And and
And
and
this
when
was at the wine exchange.
at the old wine exchange, yeah.
Yeah.
And when that happens, the whole world instantly opens to you. When someone sees that they have someone on the chain that can do what they do or acquire and retain information at the same level that they do, then the floodgates open.
Yeah.
Then it's like, "Whoa, I want to give you everything." And so I was drinking out of a fire hose, when I was 23 years old. I was tasting so many wines, having so many experiences. I was the Italian wine buyer for our store when I was 23. So, right, I was already going to Italy in 1993. I was a punk kid, and I was already going on buying trips. And that immersion combined with retention at the same time, I was reading wine books every night of my life. Before I went to bed, I read an hour about wine every night. So Anthony Hansen's Burgundy book, I read it 3 times. Stevenson's Alsace book, I read it 3 times. Remington Norman's, Great Wines of Burgundy, read it 3 times. And that what that does is it's retention. You know how it is, like when you say someone's name, the whole concept of saying someone's name. Well, hello, Valerie, and you say, oh, welcome, Valerie, and then by the fourth or fifth time, I remember your name's Valerie, right?
Yep.
It's the same way with retention in wine, but it's like drinking out of a fire hose. It's a millionfold. And so what you have to do is you have to read it 3 times, so you grab a third of it each time. So or even a tenth of it. So even after you've read these books 3 times, you have maybe half the information in that book available to you in your head. And then you combine that with tasting. See, I got to read all these great books and then taste these wines that cemented what I had been reading. And I was really super fortunate, Valerie, and then on top of that, I will say honestly, without sounding like a weenie, you do have to have a gift for it a little bit. You
Yeah,
have to be able to
I believe that.
taste.
I do.
You have to have a palate, and the palate is done through its genetics. Whether you can taste things or recall certain things, remember certain things. So the combination of recall, palate, retention, and being able to experience all that in my early 20s was amazing. So I was super lucky. My God, super lucky.
But there's also something called taking advantage of opportunities.
I was very into that as well.
Yeah.
I was very hungry. I was starving. Give me all the hours you could. Give me, and I'll go to any event. I'll go to any tasting. I will read any book you give me. I was completely and fully immersed. As some people would say, it was almost a problem, not from a drinking standpoint, but just from a nerding out standpoint.
Yeah, sure.
And then what happens is you build that, and then a lot of that is just already in there. So there's a certain level of recall with certain things. Now it has to be refreshed every year, like we discussed. This changes every year. So it needs to be refreshed, but at some point you only need to recharge 10% of the battery, right? Instead
Right.
of 60% of it, because
Yes.
the other 90% is constantly charged. And unfortunately, very lucky that that's where I'm at today. So
So it's interesting that in my early journey, as I got into the wine auction thing, and then by the way, kind of with you, because I was so fascinated, then they asked me to be the chair the next year because I was
mhm,
working harder than everybody else was.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I was so fascinated by it. And if they needed anything, I mean, I just came to your store and you guys were really nice to me. So,
And all BS aside, your level of retention, I know your superpower as well, because you went from knowing nothing about wine to
that's
knowing
true.
a ton very, very quickly. So all respect to you. It's unbelievable to me that you didn't know anything about wine when you walked in the door that first time.
Nothing, nothing, nothing,
It's
nothing.
remarkable.
You
You
guys
because
are really
you're
nice.
you're you're a smart cookie now, sister. You
Well, I know I'm I hang around you guys as much as I can. But what I think is fascinating is, and I think it's important. One thing I wish people would take from my experience is if someone says, "Oh, I don't want to drink wine," or "I'm not interested in wine," whatever, none of that really matters. For me, wine is like a history lesson.
100%.
Right. I'm
Same.
so fascinated, not only by what I hear from you, but what I've learned and all of the things about wine. Every wine is a little historical character. And
Yeah.
like you said, it changes and they're all different. And some of us go into a store and think, oh, these, I should buy the one with the pretty label. And maybe that's part of it or not.
Mhm.
But it's so fascinating to learn how they're grown and how, I mean, we went to Italy once and how the vine is on the hillside, and
Mm.
depending on which direction it faces the sun is how the
Mhm.
grapes are going to grow. I just think that's fascinating.
Beyond. It's you're experiencing, we call it liquid history, here at the store. And not just liquid history from a chronological standpoint, from a year to year standpoint, but also when you talk about the age of the vineyards themselves, these, we may delve into later or whatever, but grapevines can survive and thrive for a long, long time, depending upon certain conditions. And when you're drinking wine from vineyards that were planted over a century ago, and you know that these grapes were there. There's vineyards that were planted during the Civil War. There's vineyards that were planted prior to World War I, World War II, and they've still survived and they still give you this experience every year. And because of vintage conditions and weather and such, they'll give you a slightly different spin on that experience each time. That is beyond incredible to me. And every year I'm just amazed when you taste a new vintage or something. You're like, no, this tastes almost like this one from 10 years ago, but not quite because there's this in it. And that's when we get to start nerding out on it again. And that's why it always changes. When that landscape's always changing, it's not drinking the same bottle of water all the time. And that to me is fascinating. When you drink one label and you drink it over 20 years, you're drinking 20 different wines.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just that. Well, some we can get into it a little later, but some labels are made so that there's what we call maybe a consistency of style and flavor in certain wines year to year. But we don't look for that here. We're more artisan and drinking that history, and that's what we love.
So what is it about? Because it sound, yeah, and I believe you, but what is it about how long the vine is in the ground that impacts it?
For me, and it's an interesting question because there's no real like one straight answer for it. And the thing is, in general, what most people say is that with older vines, the vine establishes a greater sense of equilibrium. It becomes happy. It sets down roots. Vines are like people. When you first plant them in the ground, they're young, they're impetuous, they're squirrel. And the grapes reflect that young, impetuous, nervy nature of youthful vines. And then they get into their teenage years. Vines around the age of 8 to 12 years old can honestly give you some of the worst wine they're ever going to produce.
Is that right?
Yes, yeah. Young
Fascinating.
vines will give you this insanely fruity wine that may not be complex, but it's just like blah. And 8 to 12, sometimes vines can get a bit surly and just yeah, I'm not talking to you and trying to figure themselves out. And by the time a vine gets mature, call it 15, 18 years old, then it starts getting into cruise mode. And then with these vines, some of these vines that live up to 100 years, they really don't start giving you their best until they're 30, 40 years old. And then from there, you have this wonderful, consistent quality. And an old vine can maybe give you more concentration or maybe more intensity in a wine consistently. But what it does do, it gives you a level of complexity every year that a younger vine can't give you. The roots have gone deeper down into the soil, deep down into the granite or the bedrock or the limestone or whatever they're planted in. That vine is finding things and grabbing things and bringing it up into the berries themselves that a younger vine is not proficient enough to do yet. And beyond that, the capability of creating a consistent greatness with the old vines. You know what you're going to get year to year. They get into this wonderful, like little groove where even if vintage conditions can be this way or another, but they will always give you within 20% of the mean, right? As opposed to young vines, which if the vintage conditions are really bad, will bail out on you altogether, or if vintage conditions are really great, maybe give you something, profound. but old vines will always give you this level of consistency and quality and greatness that a lot of younger vineyards can't give you. And again, that's not to say that young vines cannot create great wines, because young vines have created great wines. But I would say in general, patience is the key. You know, the wine business is a patient business that's completely and constantly surrounded by impatient people.
Yes.
Um, you
Yes.
know, and no one wants to wait. No one wants to wait for a vine to get old. But yeah, that's
Especially the winemaker.
the winemaker would always, well, okay, that's an interesting point, right? Does the winemaker want to jump into a scenario where the vines are already old and the wine's already cruising and already of a certain type of quality and style, or based on ego or narcissism or just wanting to make their own mark, do they jump into a brand new project where the vineyards are planted from scratch and they're out there putting the sticks in the ground and creating that, right? So it's a very interesting point you bring up because I think winemakers would be pretty cool with it either way. But I think there are some winemakers that are like, I'm boots on the ground. I want to create this project from the start and make my mark. Or other winemakers may be, look at this great vineyard, this great property, this classic historic property. I'm so honored to come in and be the next custodian of this property, to be the next keeper, of the quality here and shepherding the grapes from these vineyards into the bottle in a way that the reputation of the property is maintained and intact. There's two different ways to look at it.
And it's the same thing about the personality of the grape and the vineyard. It's also the personality of the winemaker, right? And everyone
Ah,
and
yeah.
everybody has their own personality and what they want to achieve,
Yeah. And every
right?
winemaker has their own taste. There's certain
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that have influenced them. And the thing is, even though the grapes give you something, but the winemaking does impact wine quality and style, of course. And all the winemakers will say, "Oh no, I don't do anything," but in fact, they do something. In that shepherding, they're shepherding it a certain way. That wine's going down a certain path once it gets into the winery based on a certain style that they're looking for. So the winemaker's impact is strong, stronger than sometimes the winemaker will lead you to believe, and sometimes stronger than you think based on the historical nature of the properties that they're making wine from.
So I have a question. You talked about the age of the vines and so forth, and I've heard a phrase
Hmm.
that's called a first growth.
Hmm.
I don't know whether any of our listeners or viewers have heard that, but tell us, so what is a first growth wine?
Well, that's a deep dive, but we're going to do a short summary on that deep dive right
Okay, all
now.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
So first growth refers to the Bordeaux region in France. So let's
And
go to
only there?
yeah, yeah. Well, it's expanded since then, but the origins of what we would call a first growth has its origins in the Bordeaux region in France. And basically, we're going back to the before is the 1830s, 1840s. Well, where there was a big like a World's Fair, and
Right. There
something
was.
like something along those lines, the Paris Exposition,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. And what happened is, they needed some kind of classification. Wait, who are going to be the cool wineries that get to come, work, pour at this fair, have this big exposition? So basically, they went about the process of delineating a qualitative scale of the top chateaus in Bordeaux at that time. And it was done through a number of factors: the quality of the wine, the people, the land that was owned, the historical reputation of the land itself, et cetera, et cetera. And then what happened is Bordeaux devised this cru classification. And it was a series from 1 to 5, generally, 5 levels, 5 tiers. And they put certain top chateau in Bordeaux on each tier based on all their research and evaluations, right? So on the top tier at that time, this was in 1855, is when this classification was released. And in 1855, they decided that Chateau Lafite Rothschild and Chateau Latour and Chateau Aubryon and these types of wines were on the top tier. And then there was a second tier of wines like Chateau Pichon Lalande, Chateau Coste d'Esternel, Chateau, et cetera, et cetera. And they did this qualification through 5 levels of wines on the left bank of Bordeaux, not the right bank, because the right bank wasn't really happening until later. So this was through Pauillac, the left bank. So north of Bordeaux, the city itself, and south of Bordeaux, the city itself. So the classification at that time was only for wineries on the left side, on the west left bank of the river, and that's where this first growth, second growth, third growth naming and whole process began. Now, other areas of the world have kind of capitalized on that and kind of used it for themselves. So Germany has a classification based on that now. Austria does. Burgundy, to a certain extent, started with Premier Grand Cru and Premier Cru vineyards. They did that classification starting in the 1930s, right? So they saw what Bordeaux did, and 80 years later, like, well, we need to classify our vineyards. So
Sure.
and,
Yeah.
but they couldn't do it exactly like Bordeaux. Then they have to admit that Bordeaux was right, or you know what I mean, that they were following them. So they put their own spin on it based on individual vineyard sites. But yeah, that's how the whole growth thing started: first growth, second growth, third growth, and everyone's kind of used that. So in Napa, they'll say, "Oh, Dominus is a first growth," or "Harlan is a first growth,"
Right.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
Napa, and so
I-
forth and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to California.
Mhm.
Do you have anything like that? Do we see anything like that in California wines?
No classification system in California whatsoever. Um,
And do you think that will come? Do you think it's important?
this is where I'll start stirring the pot, and
Okay.
creating a little sense of controversy. I think California should probably stop at just where they're at right now with these different AVAs, American viticultural, areas that have already been denoted. I think having these AVAs denoted is already a great step. Whether it's like we with Spring Mountain or Howell Mountain or
Right.
Calistoga or Santa Rita Hills or Russian
Right.
River Valley, these where we're at in our wine, um, you know, it takes a long time to get to the point to determine what's great and what's not. And I don't think we're fully at the point California is to really determine what could be considered a first growth or second growth, et cetera. Now, part of the notation in 1855 was done based on the quality of the wines. Well, think about it. The quality of the wines was really tied into the location already at that point in time. Winemaking was much more rustic. Technology wasn't there, et cetera, et cetera. We're in
Right.
a place now on a global level where you can make first growth quality wine from a lot of different places based on the technology and vineyard management capabilities and winemaking capabilities that you have in front of you. Back in the 1850s, it was more dirt based because that dirt, based on these rustic styles of winemaking, consistently created greater wines. I think there's great areas in California. Howell Mountain and all the mountain areas in Napa make beautiful wines. That hillside up on the eastern flank of Oakville, the western flank of Oakville is fantastic wines. Russian River Valley makes beautiful Pinot Noirs. Santa Rita Hills makes beautiful Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from the western side of the valley, moving into the eastern side. So there's great potential in California, but before we have a growth system in place, I think that's going to be a while. There's still more work to be done.
A little more time.
A
And
little
then we have
more time.
and then we
Again,
have the
getting back to
Central Coast.
patience.
Yeah, the great Pinots along the Central Coast.
Beautiful wines. But,
Beautiful.
but the one thing I would say is there's a sameness to those wines. When you go to the San Lucia Highlands, for example, a lot of the wines they taste very similar. So to say this one's a first growth and second growth, et cetera, when you have the sameness, as opposed to think about it, back in 1855, what they picked out, Lafitte already tasted different than Latour. Latour already tasted different than Aubryon. These differentiations were already noted. Margaux tasted different than Aubryon, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they were already 100, 150 years in, and had a head start and had a stronger grip on what areas grew the best wines because they didn't have the luxury of technology to make a wine better from the soils that they had. You
Right.
see?
Yep.
So the dirt was already speaking back then, and now I would say dirt speaks to everyone. It's still, but it doesn't need to speak as much anymore based on the technology available to people.
So now let's spend some time being really basic for the everybody who wants to drink wine and doesn't know what they should do.
Hmm.
Because many of us will never have the opportunity to visit Bordeaux, although I was fortunate because of your kindness that I had a little bit of time there.
Right
And
on.
I spent to meet Helen and
Hmm.
JC at that
Yeah.
time. So let's talk about I'm an everyday person. I like wine, but I have no idea what to do. So I'm going to go into the grocery store, although we're going to encourage people now to please go
Mhm.
to the wine exchange instead.
Yes.
And the freeway construction will be done soon. So it'll be
Yeah.
easier to get in and out of Dyer Road East, going back into Sky Hollow.
Brook Hollow.
Brook Hollow, excuse me,
Yep.
going to Brook Hollow. They're
Yeah.
very easy to get to, and they're very friendly, great people. So I want to go in there, and I just don't even know what to pick. And I often said to you, Kyle, how do you know what wine you should pick? And you've often said the one you like. But how do I know? I so many pretty labels,
Yeah.
and the bottles are different. Tell somebody how to get started picking a nice drink at the table wine.
Mhm. Well, we'll ask you a few basic questions. What do you like to eat? Um, what do you drink right now? Is there any wine that has ever made a mark on you? Has anything left a memory with you? Have you had any moment were you traveling somewhere and had a moment with a bottle of wine? Anything like that. So we'll do some investigative work, and from there we'll glean kind of what path to send you on. And if we still can't find a straight path there, then well, basically you need to start somewhere. So we'll start you with maybe a delicious Beaujolais from the Beaujolais region in France, which these wines are effusively fruity, low in tannin, juicy, fruit-forward, delicious wines. Or we'll start you with a really nice, basic California Pinot Noir. Something that's fruit-forward, low in those drying tannins. What makes wine dry? We'll try and work you towards something that's on the fruitier side of the spectrum, because everyone, wine's always a shock, the first time around, fine wine, um, like drinking coffee or anything like that. So you have to make adjustments for that. But we won't send you down a black diamond when you hadn't even done French fries and pizza
Right.
yet.
Yeah, sure.
You know
Okay.
what I mean? That
Absolutely.
that we know that already. So we're gonna do French fries and pizza with you, and then from there we'll find out what kind of skier you are.
Okay.
Um,
So it's Mother's Day weekend, about to
mhm.
be. And I would love to have a bottle of wine. My mom kind of likes, not my mom, let's just say a mom likes a bottle of wine. You'd like to have a nice bottle of wine for dinner.
Mhm.
I come into your store. First of all, why should I come into the wine exchange instead of going to the grocery store? And what should I buy? What's
Yeah.
good for a family dinner for my mom? Basic, nice dinner wine.
Well, what separates us out is, well, first of all, we're not small. We're a pretty big store, but we are curated. So we have 3,000 selections, but all these are diligently sorted and picked. So what we're doing is we're doing all the heavy lifting for you. My job and Tristan's job is we need to go through all these wines, sort out. And okay, you over here, you bad, you good, you really good, you over here, and we do that process for you. So when you come in, it's like all caviar. You know what I mean? You don't have to worry about quality. And then you don't have to worry about price, right? Because what we do is we price wines in a very aggressive fashion. So we have, Costco level pricing, right? But with 3,000 selections instead of 300. Um,
Right. So that's my question, because I think some of our listeners and viewers will think, oh, I can go in a wine store because it must be more expensive because it's a little kind of a boutique type of atmosphere, right?
yeah, and it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. We're actually super, super reasonable. And then you come to us and you say, "Hey, I got stuff going on for Mother's Day. We're doing a ham, right? Oh, ham. Okay, I love ham. I could eat ham every day of my life. I know what goes with ham, and so we can find you again like a great bottle of Pinot Noir or a great German Riesling, something like that. Something with just a little bit of fruitiness to go with that ham, and work it backwards from there, while still giving folks that may not drink a lot of wine like a great opening salvo experience. You know what I mean? I love German Riesling so much, and it has that little bit of fruitiness you can hang your hat on. So you taste, you're like, I could drink a lot of this. This is dangerous, and we want to give them that sense of, man, this is dangerous. So we would start there, and then from there we ask people to remember what they liked, remember what they tasted, remember what they didn't, and from there we can start sending them down a path, because we will always work with them. They come in, they're like, oh, I had this last week, it was amazing, and I had this last week and it sucked. So we go, okay, amazing, sucked. We're going down this path, and we're going to show you this now. And so we really care. I guess that's the nicest way to put it. Is we actually care about you, and we want to make sure you're drinking the best stuff. So
What is a price that someone can afford to I mean, what kind of prices do people expect when they come into the wine exchange? Because again, people think that a wine store, the idea, and you just spoke against this, because you would think that it must be a small boutique selection,
Mm.
right? But you just said actually you have more than the normal places.
Cool artisan kick-ass wine doesn't mean expensive. The level of wine, $10 to $20 a bottle, the quality level at $10 to $20 a bottle now is the best it's ever been in history. We have so
So
many great $15, $16 wines. It's remarkable. So if you can spend 15 bucks, $17, you'll get an amazing bottle of wine. It's so easy.
that's fascinating. That's great to know. So, for our listeners and our viewers, you heard it first here from Kyle at the Wine Exchange. And if you listen to him in the morning and watch his videos, you'll hear him often say, "You need to buy this one right now."
Yes.
And you just click on the button and you can order right there online. So, we hope you'll come back and we can talk about summer wines. But a
Mhm.
Mother's Day wine would be something like a light Pinot, which are California wines also, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you can go California. You can even go French. There's some great French wines. There's some great French Pinot Noirs in the southern part of France, 12, 13, $14 a bottle. And by the way, we can get as fancy as you want too, right? We go up to $10,000 a bottle if you're so inclined. But the point is, you don't need to spend that much. It's not necessary. And like for Mother's Day, I'll take a bottle that's, maybe 20 bucks, $23. Mom isn't looking for Romani Conti or Lafite Rothschild. Mom just wants a really tasty bottle of wine, and I do too. So with that in mind, I would stick to wines that aren't terribly tannic, more fruit forward. Pinot Noir, Zinfandel, California Zinfandel is a terrific choice. It's a little bolder wine, but very low in tannin, very short in tannin, and very juicy. Or a Barbera from Piedmont, an Italian Barbera. The Barbera grape makes wonderfully fruit forward, juicy wines that aren't very drying on the palate, with great energy, and they're just fun to drink. You can drink a bunch of it.
And I was with friends last week who are from Oregon, and they were talking about wines from Oregon. So talk to us
Mhm.
for a second about those. Are those a good choice for they have Pinot Noir also, right?
Yeah, Oregon Pinot Noir. We sell a lot of Oregon Pinot Noir. We love Oregon Pinot Noir because Oregon is that kind of gateway between California stylistically and the French Pinot Noirs from Burgundy, from the Burgundy region in France. So Oregon kind of splits the difference to us. So you got that more fruit forward, more friendly, hey, how you doing? Nature of Pinot Noir, along with like the cooler, more aromatic, more complex aspects of French Burgundy wines. And I would, for Oregon, honestly, I'd stick with Pinot Noir as a genre. That's what they do best. They're also doing terrific Chardonnay. However, the Chardonnays can be a little pricey. The Oregonians are very proud of their Chardonnay right now. So a lot of those Chardonnay wines can be a little heavy. So from an Oregon standpoint, I would stick with Pinot Noir as the go-to genre from Oregon currently.
I do want to tell our viewers and listeners a little bit more about the wine exchange because your store is so fascinating. First time I went in there was like a not a pool table, but a place in the front where people could gather. And I thought, this
Mhm.
is like my kind of place. This is not a traditional, straightforward retail store.
No.
It's fascinating.
Mm.
And now you have a wine bar.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
talk about your wine bar. How does that actually work?
I love our wine bar. We have 24 wines basically on tap, if you will. We're using the Italian Enomatic machines that require a card with a chip reader, and you simply get a card up front. It's like basically opening a tab at a wine bar. You hand
Okay.
your credit card up front. We hand you the card. You go into our wine bar, and there's 24 wines on tap. You stick the card in the reader. You push the button. 1 ounce, 3 ounce, or 5 ounce pours. The wine pops out. You pull your card out. You enjoy. It's the easiest darn thing in the world, and allows us to put together 24 really great wines. We're so frustrated with restaurants and their buy the glass programs nowadays with $25 for an okay glass of wine, and we really wanted to shift the dynamic on that. So now instead of paying $25 for a glass of wine that the bottle costs $15, you can now get a $15 glass of wine from a bottle of wine that costs $50. So we wanted to flip it, and that's what we're doing right now.
So what I just want to make sure that everybody understands. So for example, what I did is I go in there and I see a bottle of wine that I would never buy. I wouldn't say never, but
Mhm.
probably would not buy that bottle of wine. It's a very expensive bottle of wine. It's not, I don't need to do that.
Mhm.
I don't need to spend that much money. But in the wine bar, I can have a small glass of that wine.
You can do a 1 ounce taste. It's like $3.
Yeah,
Or
and I
not.
get to taste, so it's my opportunity to taste something that's like a luxury for me.
It's amazing, and I think it's a great experience, and it's working. People love it. People are adoring the wine bar and the format the way we have it set up right now, and it's open 7 days a week. You know, we're Monday through Sunday from 10 a.m. until at least 5 on Sunday, and then till 6 on the rest of the day, rest of the week. So it's a perfect happy hour thing. You come, have a glass of wine for happy hour, then head off to dinner. Boom.
Yeah, you can go there with your friends.
Yes, and that's what
Right.
happens. Thursday, Friday,
Is it?
Saturday nights, we have 15, 20 people in here, and then they all got dinner reservations.
Yeah, is that right? And
Yeah.
some of us are having a wine tasting there in a few weeks that you were gracious enough to coordinate with us for a Backhouse Dance, a
Yeah.
charity event.
Bordeaux, right? Looking forward.
Bordeaux, yes,
Yeah.
Bordeaux, fresh off the boat. It's time for
Yep.
Bordeaux's
22s.
2022. So we're excited about that. Having you today is, gosh, it's my dream. I think so much of you and Tristan. You, as you know, I do. I'm just fascinated, and I love listening to you. And I'm so fascinated with the history of wine. I could hear about wine all the time, and whether you drink a lot or not, I want our listeners and our viewers to understand that if you like history, but you don't really care about drinking wine, you should still learn about wine
Mm.
because there is
Yep.
so much to learn about the people who grow it and have lived with it. It's kind of like, I mean, it's really being a farmer, right? You worry about your crops all the time, and if it rains, you're in trouble. And
We're completely dependent on what Mother Nature gives us. It is completely farming
yeah,
at the highest
absolutely.
levels.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Is there anything you would like our listeners or our viewers to know about you or about wine or anything? And I'm hoping that you will come back again. But for today's episode, anything you'd like to share with them?
I'll just leave everyone with the fact that try wine. You know, wine's not scary. It's not expensive. It is beautiful. It is fantastic, and it is one of the greatest beverages ever created on planet Earth. And come to our store, Wine Exchange, to enjoy that beverage in many ways. And you know, beyond that, I would say just come see us and let us kind of get you started. You know, and get you started on farming, on history, etc. It's all in there. It's more than just having a glass of, can I say, a glass of barefoot. You know what I mean? It's
Sure.
fine wine is so much more, which Valerie, you discovered for yourself, coming from nothing and all of a sudden being immersed in this culture, and all of a sudden you're like, I get it now, and the light bulb goes on, and then you can't get enough. And yeah, come join our club.
And if you're not sure what you want, again, go to the wine bar. You
Yep.
can just have little sips of wine out of these expensive bottles for just a small amount. Kyle Meyer, this is what SoCal with Val is about: the bites, the sips, the sights, the stories that make Southern California such a beautiful and fun place to live, to stay, and to play. Every week, we're going to bring our audience more of the treasures hiding right underneath our nose, right in our own backyards, and a few surprises as well. We're going to do more wine with Kyle Meyer. So be sure to join us again next week, every Friday at 4 o'clock. If you're in the car, you're leaving town and wonder what you should do, stop by the Wine Exchange, grab a bottle of wine for your weekend. And we'll have another guest, another local story, and another reason to stay here and fall in love with Southern California. And we do hope we'll have Kyle Meyer back soon. But until then, keep living life with a little more sunshine, a lot more adventure, and a whole lot of flavor. Thank you for joining SoCal with Val. And thank you, Kyle.
You're welcome. My pleasure.